off in our number 10 spot, the Sumerian civilization. The ancient Sumerians were a group of people that suddenly became established in Mesopotamia circa 2900 BCE. No one is quite sure where they came from originally, but they believed and documented that their origins were not from planet Earth. According to ancient texts, the Sumerians were created by an alien race called the Anunnaki, who came to Earth after their planet Nibiru collided with another planet in the solar system. The aliens found themselves in short supply of gold, which they needed in their atmosphere, and saw that Earth was in high supply, so they landed here and created a new species that was half alien, half human to mine the gold for them. Now, it does sound a little crazy, but the Sumerians were real and they did have advanced scientific, agricultural, and technological knowledge, as well as an acute understanding of the solar system, which was highly advanced at their time. Researchers have recorded clay pot batteries that still contained electrodes, a flyable model airplane, as well as an unexplainable capability to cut large stones with exact precision. Not to mention that rockets, airplanes, and helicopters were all depicted on certain artifacts from the time too. Even stranger is that there is mitochondrial DNA evidence linked to a woman in Africa dating more than 100,000 years back near a gold mine. While of course we might never know for sure, the legend of the Anunnaki has made archaeologists question many things, and if it turns out to be true, it would certainly rewrite history.
The Baghdad Battery. The Baghdad Battery is a fascinating ancient artifact that was discovered in Iraq in 1936, consisting of a clay jar with a copper cylinder and an iron rod inside. While mainstream archaeologists consider it to be a simple vessel for storing scrolls or valuables, they're not 100% sure. So some folks have entertained a more exciting possibility. Enter the aliens. I think everything I picked has some sort of supposed alien connection, at least according to me, so prepare for that. Some hypothesize that this ancient relic is a sophisticated power device. According to some, ancient civilizations could have been far more advanced than we give them credit for, and they might have harnessed electricity for various purposes, but forget about human ingenuity. Maybe the Baghdad Battery was brought to the fine people of Earth with the assistance of a far more advanced species from outer space. Some believe that the ancient astronauts from other worlds visited Earth in the distant past and shared their knowledge of electricity with us. Maybe they left the Baghdad Battery as a small gift or a souvenir from their intergalactic journey, offering a glimpse into their advanced technology.
Number 8. A goddess. On the western coast of India, there are ruins of a temple to the goddess Patini. Now, that part alone is not unheard of, as temples and goddesses are a large part of Hinduism. However, what is out of the norm is they have found an underground secret chamber that's rumored to hold an underground shrine to the Egyptian goddess Isis. Now, the ruins are now owned by a Hindu temple and hence forbidden, so nobody's been able to check what's underneath them. But according to writer Mog Morgan, the idea that it is a secret shrine to the Egyptian goddess is very believable. He theorizes that an Egyptian traveler came to India and started a group dedicated to his own goddess, Isis, and that Patini could be the Indian evolution of the same deity. If only we could get into that chamber to know once and for all. In our number 7 spot today, we have the telharmonium. The telharmonium is regarded as one of the world's first electronic instruments. This instrument was kind of like an organ, but it used wheels to create different synthetic tones. From here, the tones would be transmitted over telephone wires with the intention of getting the music broadcast so that people could listen in. Considering the fact that this instrument was created in 1897, that's a pretty cool invention for the time, so the fact that it once existed is super cool. Unfortunately, however, the idea was taking too much energy from the grid, which led to it being totally scrapped. Instead of finding out another way to use this instrument or just waiting for technology to advance to a point where this would be able to be used, they just destroyed it. Now, in 2021, not only does the telharmonium not exist, but there aren't even any recordings of it, so it seems as though this might be one thing that's lost forever. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Library of Alexandria. This isn't necessarily technology as we now think of the word, but this certainly was one of the greatest losses we've seen. This library is said to have held a collection of over 1 million scrolls, which are said to have been all of the written works in the world at the time. The library was
founded in 300 BC, and it was where the scholars of the time would come to study. It is said that when a person visited the library, they needed to give over any books that they had so that they could be copied and added to the collection of the library. It isn't exactly clear what it was that destroyed it, but rumors range from Julius Caesar accidentally setting it on fire to an invasion that set it ablaze. At the end of the day, the building burned and everything in it was destroyed. What was in that building was absolutely priceless, and we can only guess at what secrets it held. Unfortunately, many of what was in that library wasn't written anywhere else, so it's destined to stay a mystery. In our number 5 spot today we have Cloudbuster. In the 1950s, a man named William Reich created a pseudoscientific thing that was called a cloudbuster. It is said that this device could manipulate a certain energy that would affect the atmosphere, which would then change the patterns of the weather. The energy that the device is said to manipulate is called orgone energy. It is said that they actually used this device on a farm in the 1950s, and it actually worked when it ended up calling down rain. Apparently people have tried to make modern cloudbusters, but to severe consequences for both the person who made it as well as the area surrounding their invention. Many people are wondering now if this cloudbuster ever actually worked, and if it did, how? Because we just can't seem to make anything like it. If you had a working cloudbuster, what would you do with it? Do you make a snowstorm? A perfectly rainy day? I don't know. Let me know down below in the comments what you would do. In our number 4 spot today we have Starlight. Starlight was created in the 1970s and 80s by a British hairstylist and amateur chemist, Maurice Ward. What Starlight was a heat-resistant plastic that was basically indestructible. This plastic could withstand temperatures of 10,000 degrees Celsius, and it could withstand a force 75 times that of Hiroshima. Of course, when people heard about this invention, it became the talk of the town. When Maurice brought the material on TV, he covered an egg in Starlight, blasted it with a blowtorch for 5 minutes, and then when the Starlight was peeled back, the egg was still cold. NASA of course wanted to know what the heck Starlight was and how they could get their hands on it, but Maurice was really worried about what would happen if his invention fell into the wrong hands. This led to him keeping the makeup of Starlight a complete secret that he took with him to his grave. It has been said that the company ThermaShield has been able to replicate Starlight when they received the rights in 2013, so maybe this one will be making a comeback after all. In our number 3 spot today we have the Apollo Gemini space program technology. This isn't necessarily technology that has been entirely lost, but it has been the source of many confused scientists. The race to get to space was a fast, cutthroat one, with everyone trying to be the first. With everyone running around trying to create all of these new technologies before anyone else, and with private contractors being brought on for certain things in order to help, all of the schematics and original components are so disorganized and scattered that now NASA staff are trying to reverse engineer the entire thing to see how it all worked together in tandem. Not to mention how those private contractors of course took all of their records with them, leaving no records behind for anyone to be able to get a full view of how this was all able to take place. I guess no matter the rush, it's equally as important to keep the documentation. You would think that NASA would have had someone just to keep documents, right? I feel like there's gotta be someone out there who's got that job now. In our number 2 spot today we have the Wardenclyffe Tower. This tower was also known as the Tesla Tower, so I'm sure you can guess who built it. This tower was an early experimental wireless transmission station that was designed by Nikola Tesla. It was located in Long Island in 1901 and 1902. So here's the thing. The industrialist J.P. Morgan was the one who asked Tesla to create this wireless tower that could send messages across the world. Okay, sweet. That's super useful to us, so that would be great, right? Well, what Tesla built was even better. It was a device that would transmit free electricity across the world. What? Free electricity? That's amazing! Well, when Mr. Morgan found out, he shut the project down, had the tower destroyed, and ruined it for everyone. Imagine we all had free energy right now. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a little irritated now that I know this. Tesla's ability to wirelessly power light bulbs and other devices short distances is something that we still cannot replicate or implement in an economic way today. In our number 1 spot today we have the Tesla oscillator. Have you ever wanted to live through an earthquake on purpose? No? Me neither. And good thing we don't, because this little old gadget doesn't exist anymore. Apparently Nikola Tesla did though, when he built the Tesla oscillator. also known as the earthquake machine. This oscillator resonated at such a frequency it shook the buildings around him. While this wasn't the intended use, this is what ended up happening. It is said that he couldn't get it to shut down, so then he had to take a sledgehammer to it to destroy it and stop the shaking. Since this destruction and accidental earthquake, no one has ever been able to replicate the same sort of thing. And that's probably a good thing, to be perfectly honest. Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have Diolkos. The Diolkos is honestly an unbelievable creation, and it was kind of like the world's first railway. In ancient Greece, near Corinth, those living in the area at the time created a paved trackway that allowed boats to be moved over land across the Isthmus of Corinth. This created a huge and convenient shortcut that was commonly used to transfer goods, but in the times of war it also helped to speed up naval campaigns. This trackway allowed them to avoid the long and dangerous circumnavigation of the peninsula. The rudimentary railway was used from 600 BC until the middle of the very first century AD. Not only did this literally pave the way for railways and overland ship transports to come, but it was also totally unique in its time, which is so fascinating. I'd be so mad if I was the last guy who had to go around the peninsula though before the trackway was created. In our number 9 spot today we have the Metropolitan Sepulchre. I don't know how to say that word, I'm gonna be honest. Okay, this one isn't exactly ancient, but it is a proposed mega project from a long time ago, and it's absolutely wild, so I couldn't wait to include it on this list. Basically, in 19th century London, everyone was like, wow, people die a lot. Where are we gonna put all the bodies? Well, great question, everyone. As it turns out, the answer for some people was to build a huge death pyramid. This mega project was a massive pyramidal necropolis that was proposed for construction in Primrose Hill. It was designed by the architect Thomas Wilson, and it was intended to be 90 stories high and capable of holding up to 5 million bodies. There also would have been an astronomical observatory at the pyramid's peak, but there's something about passing 5 million bodies that would probably ruin anyone's appetite for looking at the stars. In the end, the $7 million project was never built, and instead there was a creation of garden cemeteries throughout the city. In our number 8 spot today we have Gran Cavallo. Also known as Leonardo's horse, this was a sculpture that the Duke of Milan commissioned Leonardo da Vinci to make for him in 1482. This wasn't just any sculpture, however. It was intended to be the largest equestrian statue in the entire world, and it was meant to be a monument to the Duke's father. Da Vinci did a ton of research and preparations for this creation, and even made an enormous clay model of it as well, which was displayed to the public. Before it could be casted in bronze, however, the French had invaded Italy, and the Duke used the bronze that was intended for the horse, and instead dedicated it to be used to cast cannons instead. Sadly, when the city fell, the clay model horse was used as an archery target by the French soldiers, and it was destroyed. Although this project was never completed, 5 centuries later, his surviving design materials were used as the base as people began trying to carry out these unfinished plans. In our number 7 spot today we have silphium. This is less of a technology and more of something that was once naturally occurring and used for a multitude of things, but is now lost. Silphium is a lost genus of fennel plant that was used quite a bit during the Roman times. It was used as a form of birth control as well as a cure for many ailments. The plant is said to have been plentiful once along the coast of what is now Libya. Apparently this plant was something that was highly valued, and it even appeared on several forms of currency because it was so highly appreciated. It is speculated that this plant may have grown only in a small portion of the world, and it was simply just over-harvested until it was driven to extinction. It wasn't used by everyone when it was used, and this could be because it was probably quite expensive. So while this wasn't a man-made creation or technology, I feel like it definitely still applies to today's list as a plant, and its medical properties are something that just may be lost forever. In our number 6 spot today we have the pyramids. Alright, I'm just gonna ask, how the heck were the pyramids built? The more I learn about it, the more I'm convinced it must have been aliens, because it just seems so crazy and intricate and impossibly amazing. The pyramids of ancient Egypt may just appear to be amazing, incredible tombs that are something to be jealous of, but they really are so much more than that. Not only have they given researchers and historians incredible insight to what life in ancient Egypt was like, they have also opened the doors to some of the greatest mysteries. Firstly, there was the transportation of the massive stone stones that they used, some of which are believed to have come from nearly 500 miles away. Getting all of the materials from point A to point B is more than fascinating in itself, but there's more questions. There were not iron tools or chisels at the time, so how were they able to shape their stonework with such incredible precision? How were they able to finish the tops of the pyramids with the same precision despite their standing over 400 feet tall? And how were they able to build them in such a way that they've been able to withstand all of the elements for 4,500 years? You see what I mean at this point? It is clear that however they were able to build the pyramids in ancient Egypt, we just don't have that kind of technology or knowledge nowadays, because there is no way we'd be able to recreate these amazing structures in the same way as the original. Because people are gonna be like, we could create the pyramids. I'm like, I know we could now, Mr. Crane Operator, but imagine having to go up there all by yourself. No crane in sight. Just you and a big old rock. Good luck. In our number 5 spot today we have the Sloot coding system. Okay, this one isn't exactly ancient, but I still had to talk about it today because I had never even heard of this at all before. Jan Sloot was a Dutch electronics engineer, and in the mid to late 90s he created a data storage method that could hold an entire full-length movie in just 8 kilobytes of data. Considering most modern technologies still require much more data to store a full-length movie, this kind of technology was extremely impressive for the times. Investors of course quickly began to flock to Jan. When he presented his data storage system to a man named Roll Piper from Philips, Roll ended up later leaving Philips in order to join Jan's company. Just days before the code and system was due to be released, Jan ended up being found dead in his garden from what seemed to be a heart attack. This is of course extremely tragic and sad, but you might be sitting there thinking the same thing that I was. His death probably didn't stop people from still seeking the answers that had yet to be released on how this storage system was created. Well, as it turns out, people of course did look, but a key piece of information regarding it all was on a floppy disk that was in Jan's possession. Since his death, no one has ever been able to find this floppy disk that is said to hold these secrets. In our number 4 spot today we have the Antikythera mechanism. The Antikythera mechanism is an extremely mysterious discovery that has stumped researchers ever since it was found. This artifact was found 150 feet below the surface of the Aegean Sea in a shipwreck and is the oldest kind of computer ever recorded, as it was dated back to the 7th century BCE. The author David Childress likened the finding to if they had found a jet plane in King Tut's tomb. That's how bizarre this discovery really was. Due to the complexity and oddity of the finding, alien enthusiasts have believed for quite some time that it may have been technology that was passed down from some sort of superior being. This first analog computer may have had a ton of uses, and researchers aren't 100% sure about all the ways it was used, but it is known to have been some sort of astronomical calculator. It was able to predict eclipses and different planetary placements. The mechanism was able to calculate the position and running time of each planet. How would they have been able to create this without the use of sophisticated astronomical tools? We have been able to recreate the mechanism to see how it functions, but no one is able to tell how it could have possibly been created. In our number 3 spot today we have Mithridate. Mithridate was named after King Mithridate VI, who was the king of Pontus. It is said that he was so terribly afraid of being poisoned that he, over the course of 7 years, adapted his body to different poisons. It is also said that after mixing 45 ingredients together, he was able to create Mithridate, which is said to have been a universal antidote to all poisons. The exact formula has of course been lost to time, but historians have said that it is believed that the antidote contained opium, chopped vipers, and small amounts of both the poisons and their antidotes. Imagine, just opium, just throw it in there, why not? The antidote was originally created around 100 BCE, and it was actually used by many people for centuries, and even apparently as recently as the 19th century. It is unclear how the recipe entirely disappeared, but despite some of the best efforts, no one has been able to recreate it since the last known use. In our number 2 spot today we have Stradivari violins. If you're a string instrument enthusiast, then you definitely have heard of the Stradivari family and the instruments created by them. These instruments were created by 1650 and 1750 and were highly sought after in their day, and even more so now. Apparently these instruments instruments featured an unparalleled sound quality that has been found to be impossible to recreate. The instruments that have survived through to modern day are now worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, so it is abundantly clear that these instruments are incredibly valuable. Here's the catch though. Experts can't agree or figure out what exactly it is that makes them sound so wonderful. Some have speculated that the magnificent sound comes from a fungus that grew in the region, and some think that it is the density of the wood, but regardless, no one really knows for sure. At the end of the day, the secrets of the family art were laid to rest with the Stradivari family. In our number 1 spot today we have Roman cement. Concrete is the most commonly used building material in the world, but our current cement, water, sand, rocks mixture is nothing compared to the original stuff. While our modern concrete was created in the 1700s, there was obviously stuff that was being used before. In fact, concrete was used quite a bit during the antiquity by Egyptians, Assyrians, and Romans. The Romans seemingly used it the most, and they are the ones who really perfected the recipe that we just can't seem to replicate now. Apparently the ancient mixture involved burnt limestone as well as crushed rocks and water, but whatever the heck it was, their structures were a lot more withstanding than ours are now, which has led people to question, how do we get that level of hardiness back in our modern day concrete? And to that I say, like most other things, I do not know. Starting off in our number 10 spot we have Greek fire. Greek fire is essentially the primitive form of napalm, and it was first created in Greece. It was used often and efficiently for naval battles during the Byzantine Empire. It was used and worked well for these battles because it was able to not only float on top of the water, but it also was difficult to put out the fire using water as well. The secrets regarding this substance were guarded so greatly as it was such a powerful weapon at the time. The information on what it was made out of, how it was stored, or how it functioned remains a mystery to this day. The formula to recreate it has been tried many times, but it is currently thought that the particular storage and some sort of pressurized delivery system are what played such a huge role in its functionality and ignition, and we have yet to figure out those secrets. In our number 9 spot today we have flexible glass. This is something that is actually sometimes debated on whether or not it actually existed at all, but there is some evidence and anecdotes that would suggest it absolutely did at one point. The story surrounding this lost creation depict a glassmaker who presents a glass vessel which holds various different things depending on where the story came from and who's telling it. The glass vessel was presented to the emperor, who inspected it before returning it to the glassmaker, who then threw it on the ground. The glassmaker then picks it up off of the ground and goes on to show the emperor that rather than broken pieces, the glass vessel just has a small dent in it, which he then proceeds to hammer back to the original shape, and thus the vessel now appears as if it had never taken any damage at all. It is said from here that rather than the emperor being excited about this new and useful creation, he began to worry that it would devalue things like the silver and gold already in circulation. This is said to have led to him ensuring that no one else knew the formula to create the flexible glass, and then subsequently beheading the poor glassmaker. This is what has ensured that if it ever were real, the flexible glass was a secret formula destined to stay in the past. In our number 8 spot today we have Damascus steel. It's possible you may have heard of Damascus steel before, and that is because the name still exists, and it is used in reference to a variety of pattern welded forged steel products, but the modern day stuff just isn't what it used to be. Historically, Damascus steel was discovered quite a long time ago, and it was used to make swords in the Middle East. It is said that these swords had the ability to cut through rocks or even completely cut through other swords, which is just insane. The exact process of how these swords were made has been lost to time, but it is rumored that Wootz steel was imported from Sri Lanka and used in the creation process along with other metals. Somehow the metals were basically weaved together rather than an alloy being created. This is what led to the steel not only being exceptionally strong, but also flexible, and it is this process that modern day smiths cannot seem to exactly replicate. The modern day Damascus products are definitely high quality, gorgeous products, but it seems as though the secrets of the past may hold something even better.
Next up we have the Nazca Lines. The Nazca Lines are a series of ancient geoglyphs located in the Nazca Desert of southern Peru. They depict various shapes, including animals, plants, and geometric patterns, and the exact purpose and meaning of these etchings remains a bit of a mystery. Some theories suggest they might have been used for astronomical or religious purposes, but The strange thing is, the scale of the designs means they can really only be appreciated from the air, and people weren't really looking down at the Earth 2,000 years ago. So who were these for? Were they used to appease gods, or maybe beings from outer space? There are all kinds of different images depicted, birds, monkeys, various different plants. Probably the strangest one though is what is often referred to by archaeologists as the astronaut. It's obviously a humanoid figure, but the size of the eyes and the shape of its body really does resemble some sort of spacesuit or classic extraterrestrial type being, so really leaves you with more questions than answers.
Coming in at number 6, Pudnamabaswamy Temple. In Kerala, India lies a grand temple containing 6 sealed underground vaults. Now, since its discovery, 5 of the vaults have actually been opened, and inside they found treasures, jewels, and gold worth millions. But there still remains one vault they have not been able to crack. In 2014, Supreme Court appointed committee members based on alleged mismanagement in the affairs of the temple were appointed to open the forbidden vault. First, they opened the metal grill door and discovered a sturdy wooden door just behind it. They opened this door as well and encountered a third door made of iron, which was jammed shut. The observers tried to force their way in, but failed. So they decided to hire a professional locksmith to open the door, but in mid-July, before the locksmith came, the royal family got an injunction from the Supreme Court against opening Vault B, and by July 2020, the Supreme Court refused to give permission to open the vault, as it was an issue involving religious sentiments. But it has left many wondering what is behind that last vault. Legend suggests that a spell is what is required to get open the last door, hence why the attempted prying methods used on the other 5 have been unsuccessful. But archaeologists are keen to hopefully one day be able to see what lies behind the sealed and forbidden vault.
Big circles. The big circles are mysterious archaeological features found in various locations across the Middle East. So these structures are massive circular shapes, visible only from above, and are made of stone walls or small stone mounds spread across different locations in the region, like Jordan, Syria, and Turkey. And they vary in size, with some stretching over 400 meters in diameter. But what were they built for? Nobody really knows. One of the most puzzling aspects of the big circles is their age, which is challenging to figure out without any artifacts connected with them or written records. Archaeologists have found it tough to date these structures accurately, leading to debates about their origins and the cultures that might have created them. Lots of theories have emerged in an attempt to unravel the purpose of these massive circles. Some researchers have put forward that the circles served as burial sites. Others speculate they may have been used to house animals, but the walls aren't really high enough for that. Most of them are only built like a few feet high. Of course, we have a bit of a similarity here to crop circles, and we all know the conspiracies surrounding them. So yeah, maybe, again, aliens, they could have a hand to play here too.
Next up at number 4, ape bones. At the Hill of Tara in Ireland, a set of strange bones were found, but they don't look like bones of a normal person. They belonged to an ape. And to make matters crazier, it's not even the only set of ape bones that have been found in Ireland. But the thing is, nobody knows how these apes managed to get there in the first place. And the only explanation is that someone, a long time ago, was taking apes up to Ireland and burying them there. One theory suggests that the apes might have been traded, but another theory is based on an Irish legend. The ancient legend claims that a group of strangers with magical powers came to Ireland on a massive ship and ruled the people from the Hill of Tara. Some think that the legend was based on a real event, and that the people they thought were magic were really a group of Egyptians with advanced technology. Now, this might seem a little out there, but despite that there are no native monkeys in Egypt itself, ancient Egyptians were incredibly familiar with monkeys, and they have held a permanent place in ancient Egyptian religion as one of the more important animal forms into which the gods might be transformed. On top of that, there's been actual DNA testing done on ancient Irish bodies that suggests they could have have an ancestor from the Middle East. And near the hill of Tara, there are 3,800-year-old remains of a boy wearing what appears to be an Egyptian necklace.
Next up we have hobbits. In 2003, scientists found some bones in Indonesia on the island of Flores. These bones belong to small human-like species they named Homo floresiensis, or hobbits. The hobbits were tiny, around 3 feet tall, and were determined to have lived an estimated 50,000 to 100,000 years back. This discovery really changed how we think about our own ancestors. Before, it was believed that only our species, Homo sapiens, had big brains and were smarter than other ancient humans, but the hobbits' small brain challenged that idea. It made us realize that early human relatives were more diverse and interesting than we thought. Some researchers think that the hobbits might have come from an earlier human group and experienced kind of an island dwarfism, adapting to the new environment over time. Small islands can have a weird effect on the animals that live on them, but it's still not 100% known. Find taught us that the story of human evolution is even more complicated than we thought before. Who knows what other species of ancient humans there could have been roaming around that we still, haven't discovered yet. They could also, of course, be aliens, but I don't actually know. I don't actually think that.
Coming in at number 2, Lovelock Cave. In 1911, miners working in Nevada's Lovelock Cave were digging through piles of guano when they stumbled upon a massive wealth of ancient relics. The miners began searching, and as they sifted through the relics, they found something as exciting as it was confusing: the mummified remains of a 6'6" man with red hair. With this discovery, the cave became an archaeological dig site, and soon even more strange discoveries were being made. Things like 15-inch sandals which appeared to have been used, as well as a giant handprint that was twice the size of any normal handprint. Now, what is extremely incredible about the discovery is that there is an old Paiute legend that talks about red-haired, freckled-faced, man-eating giants who invaded the land and preyed on the Paiute people until they managed to chase the giants into a cave and set it on fire. And some have reason to believe that this archaeological discovery could actually back up the legend. Sadly, the original red-headed mummy has been destroyed, which makes everything a bit more difficult to prove, but one explanation is that the giants could have been a real group of violent European explorers, people who tormented the indigenous peoples and then met their end in Nevada.
The Antikythera mechanism, a very fascinating archaeological discovery that continues to puzzle researchers to this day. It was found in 1901 off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera in the wreckage of an ancient ship. The device seems to be this intricate mechanical calculator believed to date back between 150 and 100 BC. Its purpose and origin still not 100% known, but its complexity is pretty astonishing, especially for the time, meaning that more advanced technology could have been present in ancient times that we're completely unaware of. Some researchers think it was used for astronomical calculations or as a calendar, but it's kinda still speculative. What they do know is that the level of craftsmanship and sophistication involved is pretty impressive. It changed assumptions about ancient technology, and despite extensive research, certain aspects of its design and function remain unknown.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have a death ray. Archimedes, if that's how you say it, was born in 287 BC in the city-state of Syracuse, which at the time was a part of ancient Greece, but now would be a part of Sicily. When the Roman army set sail to lay siege on Syracuse, he began trying to find ways to deal with protecting his home and ways to bring death to those in the Roman army. He used his knowledge of physics to build a weapon that would help fend off those sailing into the city. While he managed to make quite a few effective and honestly very cool gadgets in order to fight these men off, the one we are here to talk about today is the death ray. While this sounds like some sort of crazy laser beam, it is surprisingly much simpler despite us not being able to recreate it today. The death ray was a series of mirrors that reflected concentrated sunlight onto the Roman ships. If you've ever used a magnifying glass in sunlight, you know where this is going. Those concentrated rays of sunlight were enough to set the ships ablaze, and it is said that ship after ship of the Roman fleet all caught fire, only to then sink into the Mediterranean. Many attempts to recreate the death ray have of course happened, and some have been moderately successful, but not in the way that this historical story suggests. Maybe he just had that magic touch. In our number 9 spot today we have Ulfberht. This mysterious sword has been confusing ever since it was discovered by archaeologists. Experts were able to date this sword back to the Viking era sometime from 800 to 1000 AD, but no one could figure out how this sword was made, especially from what technologies were available at the time. It seemed as though this sword was made using techniques that didn't exist until 800 years later when the Industrial Revolution happened, so how could it have been made all this time before? It is said that everything about the sword, from the composition of the metal to the extreme heat needed to forge the blade, it just couldn't have been done at the time, but clearly it was. So how? A blacksmith who tried to recreate the sword using only methods that would have been used then explained that he was unable to make it without resorting to more modern technology. In our number 8 spot today we have Nepenthe. If you're a person who's ever had to be subjected to the process that is antidepressant medication, this one might frustrate you just a little bit. The ancient Greeks and Romans discovered a lot of things, some of which we use now and some that seem to have been lost but could have potentially proved to be exceptionally useful to us, and that is exactly what this one is. Ancient Greeks were known to treat the bereaved with this medicine that seems to have been some sort of a primitive antidepressant. It is said that it was known for its ability to chase sorrow away and also to cause forgetfulness. There are many references to this medicinal plant, but at this point we are completely unsure of which modern plant aligns with these ancient descriptions, or if it even exists at all anymore. In our number 7 spot today we have a moose cavalry. This one is hotly debated on whether or not it really happened, but I wasn't there and I know you weren't there either, and some sources claimed that this happened, so we're still gonna talk about it. It is said that King Charles XI of Sweden got sick and tired of importing horses, but of course needed a replacement for them. What better for a horse replacement than the extremely unsimilar and alarmingly large moose? Apparently a cavalry, a military unit of moose, was actually trialed for a while. This wasn't necessarily the weirdest thing in the world, because moose had actually been used in Sweden to draw the sleighs of royals, and they were great and super efficient at that job. But moose are simply not going to run toward gunfire. That's the major caveat of a moose cavalry, and I have to say, it's a pretty big one. Honestly, those moose had no idea, but their good instincts saved them from a life of work and taxes. In our number 6 spot today we have Xerxes pontoon bridges. These bridges were constructed in 480 BC during the second Persian invasion of Greece upon the order of Xerxes I. The purpose of these bridges were for Xerxes' army to transverse the Hellespont from Asia into Thrace. The Hellespont had extremely strong currents which switch up their direction. They're often turbulent and stormy waters and violent winds. Here's the thing about these bridges. We know that building them was a unique achievement, but we truly don't have a lot of information about them or how they were built. It is said that the bridges were around 2,000 meters in length and that there were 2 of them. Unfortunately, they ended up being destroyed in a storm, and you know what Xerxes' response to that was? He had all those responsible for building the bridge beheaded. People probably didn't want to work for him after that, I'd imagine. In our number 5 spot today we have the Siege of Masada. The Siege of Masada took place in 73 AD after the fall of Jerusalem, and it was one of the final events of the First Jewish-Roman War. The event took place on and around a large hilltop in what is now current-day Israel, but here's where the mega project comes in. The Romans began to build a massive earth ramp on the western side of the fortress of Masada. They managed to build it all while under the constant fire from those defending the area, and it was still just under 2,000 feet long, and it rose up 200 feet in the air. After building this ramp, they then managed to push a siege tower up the ramp. This ramp does mostly still exist, and basically what they ended up doing was like extending the side of the mountain that Masada was built on. It is absolutely insane that they did all of this just to capture people. Like all of that for 960 people? Imagine if we had ancient Romans now. Suddenly all of our cities would actually be inclusive and accessible. Ramps for all. In our number 4 spot today we have Atlantropa. Sometimes referred to as Panropa, this was an idea that honestly seems like it should be taken straight out of a sci-fi novel. This was a huge engineering plan that was created by a German architect architect Hermann Sorgel. Basically, the idea was to place several dams in key points in the Mediterranean Sea, like the Strait of Gibraltar. This would then cause a major sea level drop, which the entire point of this thing, according to Hermann, was so that this would then reveal new land to settle on. While there were some supporters of this project and Hermann actively worked on it and the plans for it right up until his death, this is one that never came to fruition and likely never will. In our number 3 spot today, we have the Colosseum. This one hasn't exactly been forgotten about, but it really was a mega project that was certainly abandoned. I'm sure most of us have heard of the Colosseum before, but if you didn't know, it used to be flooded in order to host naval battles. Imagine waiting for that bathtub to fill up. Once filled, the ships would come out and it was like the SeaWorld of the underworld. Sometimes instead of gory battles, there would be shows at the Colosseum, like a group of nude synchronized swimmers. Once the success of these events was realized, the emperor just decided to devote an entire lake to them instead. From here, non-water activities took over the stage, and they used the old floodgates to hide animals in. Early medieval era, this area stopped being used for entertainment and instead began to be used for housing, workshops, and religious situations, but now, due to earthquakes and stone robbers, most of the Colosseum is in ruins, and it is now a really popular tourist attraction. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Hidden Chamber. One of the most fascinating ancient mega projects of all times are the ones that actually exist all over, and we have unearthed quite a few. Yeah, I'm talking about those crazy, cool, unbelievable tombs and necropolises. Those things are fascinating. People are buried in places that are nicer than the one I live in. That's wild. Ancient Egyptian architecture is truly like nothing else in the world, and every day we learn more about the secrets of the past. Queen Nefertiti is high on the list of fascinating figures from the times of ancient Egypt, and there might just be an ancient mega project waiting to be uncovered when it comes to her. It is believed that hidden away in King Tut's tomb, remember that guy? Yeah, they think that in his tomb there is a hidden chamber in there, and they think that that might be where Queen Nefertiti is. This is like the most insane discovery of the 21st century. After radar tests were conducted, Egyptian officials are like 90% sure that they found a hidden chamber that also just happens to be full of treasure. It is actually thought that, although we refer to it as King Tut's tomb, it might actually be Queen Nefertiti's tomb. King Tut only died when he was 19 years old. He died before she did, which no one was expecting to happen, so if they already had a full tomb ready for this guy, I'd probably be a little suspicious if I was him. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Corinth Canal. Remember that ancient trackway we started this list off with? Well, we're gonna talk about another ancient mega project in the exact same location to end this list off with today. We've come full circle. Let's do it. The Corinth Canal was very first proposed in the 7th century BC, but the idea was abandoned because of the trackway we already talked about. See? Full circle. Look at us retaining knowledge and using it to inform us on other things. The first failed attempt to build it took place in the 1st century AD, and basically it was intended to connect the Aegean Sea to the Ionian Sea. These plans were tried many times in ancient times, but to no avail, and surprisingly, in the 1800s, the idea began to be picked up again. After many financial and operational difficulties, the canal was actually completed in 1893. Unfortunately, the canal is quite difficult to navigate for any kind of larger vessels, so it's mostly used by smaller recreational boats. If the spirits of any ancient Greeks still exist around here, they're probably so happy it finally got done. Imagine watching everyone fail at it for all those years.
Kicking off the list at number 10, ancient exercise. Athletic gear today is amazing. We have shoes that correct your stride while you're running. We have backpacks filled with water. We have clothing now designed to keep you cool. How does it even, what? It's quite impressive stuff, but just how did ancient civilizations do it? What did we do before New Balance opened? You know what I mean? Well, ancient Greeks, believe it or not, used to work out naked. Completely naked, just butt nude. The word gymnasium actually translates to the Greek term gymnasion, which meant school for naked exercise. That sounds like a pretty insane school. Xavier's school for gifted youngsters, or Ezekiel's school for naked exercise? How do we pick? Naked exercise? That's the worst place to see naked people, in my humble opinion. Should I go to the squat rack? No, maybe not. I don't know. Hey man, do you mind spotting me? Actually, never mind. I'm actually good, thanks. Number 9. Egyptian tomb curses. The walls of Egyptian tombs are fascinating. The paintings or sometimes carvings were meant to create a peaceful afterlife for those who had passed on. Pharaohs were buried with their treasure, favorite foods, everything wealthy that they owned. They believed they could take all of that with them to the afterlife. This belief of course welcomed grave robbers, so in order to prevent any Nicolas Cage national treasure hunters to come snooping by with their flashlights, many of these tombs had curses written on the walls. This one is warning trespassers that gods will wring their neck like that of a goose. Also, if I walked into somebody's property nowadays and it said trespassers next will be wrung out like a goose, I would leave. I would turn around immediately. You don't have to be an ancient Egyptian god to get that message across. I'm good. Also, buried in Mastaba, inside the found tomb of Ankh-Mahor, a pharaoh official from 4,000 years ago, a curse was written. Might do against this, my tomb, the same shall be done to your property. It also warns of Ankh-Mahor's knowledge of secret spells and magic, and threatens to fill impure intruders with a fear of seeing ghosts. Again, there's that, or there's beware of dog. Number 8. Dung beetles. Ah yes, dung beetles, the poop beetles, also known as scarabs. They're the only species in the entire world that instinctively follow the Milky Way. They just know to follow the Milky Way. How insane is that? You know how some animals just know to do things, like sea turtles, when they're hatched, they immediately sprint to the ocean to avoid, being plucked by giant seabirds. They know to go towards the sea naturally. These beetles would naturally follow the line of the Milky Way, and they would at the same time roll their poop towards it for some reason. First species in the animal kingdom to do this. So are dung beetles trying to phone home? Why does their planet need so much poop? Why are they rolling it towards the cosmos? Does Thor need this? Does Odin need all this? Symbols of these beetles are seen either in hieroglyphics in Egypt, but also near the sacred lake at the Temple of Karnak, there's a massive dung beetle monument, a poo-poo bug monument. Look at this thing, it's beautiful. There's even a legend still to this day behind the statue that if you walk around it 9 times, you would find health, wealth, and love. The scarab is there to represent the god Khepri, which at the time, Egyptians believed was the sun. I grew up thinking the sun was a baby. Thanks, Teletubbies.
Coming in number 7, we have the pyramids. I mean, this one was a given. You can't make a list of amazing ancient relics without throwing the pyramids on that list, because we still don't know what happened. How did they build these big ass triangles? They are over 4,000 years old. They are 147 meters high. They have a ton of rooms and secret chambers and booby traps and detailed markings all over the walls. The Egyptians didn't have access to modern metals or even wheels. There's an estimated 2 million stones in a single pyramid. The stones weigh somewhere between 1.5 and 3 tons. How on earth did they do it? Some people say aliens, which I don't believe. I mean, it could have been some space dudes, but I would hope that they would give us something a little bit better than rock towers. I mean, give us a ray gun or something, that's what I want. But some people think that the Egyptians could have had access to some sort of tech that was far advanced for their time, but they either destroyed it because they didn't want anyone else to use it, or the tech was simply lost to time. Coming in at number 6, we have the Unreplicable disc. Have you ever tried to use a GPS other than Google Maps or Waze? They will take you all over the place and have you parked in some field that's 6 miles away from your destination. Maybe not that bad, but the Vikings had a device that put some of these apps to shame. The Unreplicable disc was a sundial type compass that could be used to navigate through the seas with an accuracy that was as good as a modern day compass. This explains how the Vikings were able to travel such great distances and always make it back to their homeland. But when you're making these long trips, eventually the sun will go down and then everyone is going to be praying that you don't get thrown off course while the sun isn't up. But the Vikings found a way to get this bad boy to work even when there was no light. How do you get a sundial to work in the dark? Well, you have magic crystals. That's how the ancient texts describe them. Did these Vikings have help from the gods? Well, probably not. What these crystals could most likely do was project light onto this compass when there was only a very small light source. So with the moon and the stars, you would be able to navigate endured seas. Coming in at number 5, we have the boomerang. Alright guys, now it's time to head down under for one of the oldest, most advanced hunting tools that we have ever seen. Sure, we have things that can kill things more effectively now than a boomerang does, but we have to appreciate how precise and deadly these things were, and how you can find some ancient relics of boomerangs that seem to be better built than the ones we have today. And in case you didn't know, boomerangs are basically a wing. Someone invented something that could fly around 2,300 years ago. Well, that is the oldest boomerang ever found, so the first one could have been even older than that. Before people had shoes, someone made something that could not only fly and kill something, but it would also return to them. I don't know who that guy was, but whoever he was an absolute legend. That guy for sure chucked that thing for the first time, and the whole tribe was like, dude, you are going to be king forever because that is the coolest thing that I have ever seen in my life. I literally don't know how the sun works, and you just made a flying stick that comes back to you like a dog fetching a ball. This is amazing. Coming in at number 4, we have Greek fire. This is one of the biggest mysteries of ancient Greek warfare. See, the Greeks had a weapon like none leather. It was fired out of a long metallic tube that was attached to boats. It was some sort of napalm-like substance that they would fire out of these tubes, and it would lace enemy ships in a flaming substance that couldn't be put out by simply pouring water on it. It must have looked like a dragon breathing fire on you. The secret as to how they were able to make such a weapon never leaked out into the wrong hands, so to this day we still have no idea how they were able to do it. Maybe some future dudes came back in time and was like, hey, you guys want to see something that's really gonna blow your mind? Well, let me show you this wild thing right here real quick. If you were an enemy getting blasted by this stuff, you would have for sure thought it was magic. Coming in at number 3, we have ancient Chinese wells. You know how we're burning through a ton of fossil fuels right now, and after saying that I literally understand why they call them fossil fuels, because it's fuel that comes from fossils? God, I am dumb sometimes. Well, we all know that there are much cleaner forms of energy that we should probably be using because the world seems like it's gonna die if we don't change up our tactics. Well, in ancient China, they had tapped into wells that were full of natural gas. They dug wells deep into the ground, and this was originally so they could harvest salt inland, because it was very hard to get salt without going down to the ocean unless you dug these massive wells. But with this, they found shots of methane. They then built bamboo tubes that led to people's homes so they could use the natural gas to heat their houses. That's pretty cool if you ask me, but now that I'm thinking about it, methane isn't the cleanest energy, but it's still amazing tech to have a natural gas chute that goes directly to your home. Coming in number 2, we have the Ulfberth sword. There was a tomb found in Scandinavia that had some amazing swords in it. There were over 100 swords discovered, and there was something that set these bladed weapons apart from all the others from the era. They were much more advanced than any other swords that were made from nations around that time. These blades were made out of 99.9% pure metal. I mean, if you were to look into most metal objects today, I'm sure they would be skimping somewhere. The metal pieces in your car probably have little bits of plastic in them to help cut cost. What was so impressive about these weapons is that the surrounding areas would not get this kind of technology until 800 years later. Between the compass that you could use in the dark when you were out on the ocean and the swords that were 800 years ahead of their time, it's no wonder that the Vikings were able to be such a force of destruction. And coming at the number 1 spot, we have Mithridatium. That sounds like something that would be pulled out of a Tolkien book, but it's actually one of the most mysterious substances made by King Mithridates IV of Pontius. This guy was living during Emperor Nero's reign around 60 BC. The king had developed a substance called Mithridatium, which was apparently an antidote to all poisons. Sounds like a pretty handy tool, especially if you're a king or emperor. We all know that people are trying to poison them at all hours of the day. Now, the recipe for this substance was never let out to the public. Only the king and Emperor Nero himself knew how to make it, and maybe they should have told a few more people because eventually the formula was lost, and since then, no one has been able to recreate this elixir. But maybe it was all a lie. Nero could have spread rumors that he had such a tool so people wouldn't be so bold to poison him. I mean, that would be a pretty smart move. Coming in number 10, we have flexible glass. I mean, think of what we could do with a substance like that. You could make windows that never break. You could make a cup that never breaks. You make a bunch of other things that could never break. Basically, it would be an extremely durable version of everyday glass, and you could bet that would be a hot selling item. The first record of flexible glass happened between the years 14 and 37 AD. There was the great Emperor Tiberius who would take exotic goods from all over the land. There was a glassmaker who came to him with something very unique. It was a beautiful vase. He handed it to the emperor, who dropped it by accident, but the vase didn't break. It dented. The glassmaker quickly repaired it in front of the emperor as a way to impress him, but it didn't work like that. The emperor saw this as a threat, for his empire had a ton of wealth in precious metals to make various items. This flexible glass could have hurt business, so to hide the secret of this glassmaker, he had him taken to the dungeon and killed. Not how this dude probably thought this was going to play out. And if you comb through history, there were a couple more times where this mysterious material pops up, but it never has made its way to this day and age. Who knows? Maybe someone will make this material and be able to keep their head on their shoulders. And guys, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps us out. Coming in number 9, we have the Hufanj Di Dong Yi. How do you know when an earthquake has happened? Well, you need a bunch of high-tech gear to tell you when it hit and how powerful it was. Well, that is actually dead wrong. There was a device in ancient China that was made by Zheng Hong. He was an incredible genius for his time and created a science seismograph that was incredibly accurate. This thing was basically a big pot that would move with the shifting Earth. There was a pendulum inside it that could point you in the direction of where an earthquake had just hit, and this device had an incredible range. It could reach up to 100 miles away. The benefit of this was an emperor could find out what villages needed help because they were just hit by a natural disaster well before they sent an envoy to come receive help. How could you make something like that with just some pot and levers? I mean, if I was alive back then, I probably would have thought earthquakes happened because you didn't give enough grain to the river god. Coming in at number 8, we have a heat ray. I mean, we have all wanted ray guns since we were kids. When will we finally get some cool futuristic weapons that can blow our minds? Well, you might want to look into the past to find something like that. The ancient Greeks had a way to blast heat at enemy ships and set them ablaze. They would have massive bronze plates that would redirect the sun's rays back at enemy ships that were approaching through the water. This would focus it like a magnifying glass and burn these ships like a weird kid who's killing ants. So the ancient Greeks had a heat ray before we had a heat ray now? That is really starting to bother me right now.
Number 7, weak wine. When we think of ancient Greeks, we think of wine and parties and apparently naked exercise, right? But was it really a drunken festival of love all the time? Did they rock and roll all night and party every day? Ancient Greeks rarely drank wine without diluting the hell out of it first. The water to wine ratio was something like 4:1. 4:1! That's insane. That's basically just water. That's crystal light you're drinking. I guess it's a good thing because you don't have to worry about waking up at 4 a.m. dehydrated. The ancient Greeks believed that drinking undiluted wine could cause blindness or insanity. Again, I think that's just called being drunk and maybe blacking out. I don't know. The 4th century poet Amphis had your back though. The best way to cure those ancient hangovers, according to thee, was to boil cabbage. And in order to keep the party going without embarrassing yourself after drinking too much sparkling Merlot, the key apparently was to bake and eat a pig's lung. That's the trick to never getting drunk. Again, I think that's just food that helped here in this situation. Either way, if you're gonna drink, do so responsibly. Number 6, Greek statues. We've all done it at one point, okay? You're at a museum, you see the statue in front of you. It's massive. The dude has like 16 abs, he's made of bronze, he's 12 feet tall. The amount of detail gone into their body and all those muscles, it's jaw-dropping to say the least. Their fingernails, their dimples, muscles everywhere. But did you know ancient Greeks would make statues, they would make that small on purpose. Men who were, well endowed were more often than not fools. They only ruled for lust. If you had a big brain, however, oh, buddy, you were the talk of the town. They would whisper in the wind as you passed by. I heard Alexander has a massive brain. Have you seen his brain? Whenever an actor would play a fool on stage, they would be given a comedically large setup. That's how you know he's the fool/villain. The way we see these statues today of these ancient rulers, it meant that they had self-control and intelligence. This whole time I thought they were just in a cold room, but you know what? That's what I'm here for. I'm here to help. Hit that like button. I'm here to historically help you on your statue knowledge. Number 5. 2020 mummies. Yeah, as if 2020 wasn't stressful enough, here's some more. Turns out we also found a lot of mummies. I'm glad Brendan Fraser's returning to Hollywood because it sounds like we might need him to suit up again real soon. I don't know. Back in 2020, while we were stuck inside watching Netflix, more than 100 sealed coffins were found in Egypt. These findings date back to 712 BC, which was a period where Egypt was controlled by foreign civilizations like Persians and ancient Greeks. These coffins were still occupied, still untouched, and hidden for thousands of years. The discovery has confirmed that Saqqara was the main burial site of the 26th dynasty, including the first known burial pyramid. That's a scary pyramid. Number 4. Colosseum hecklers. When the Colosseum was built in 80 AD, about 50 to 80,000 fans of Roman sport would just pour in. The energy here was high. This was their only source of entertainment. They didn't have DVDs or anything like that. So some fans would get so into the action that they would heckle gladiators. Well, just like a comedy show, when you heckle, they too can hear you. You're throwing off their entire game, and that's a no-go. It's gonna have to stop. Other people are also here trying to enjoy the same show. Today, a 19-year-old usher will ask you to keep it down a few times before kicking you out. But in Roman Colosseum days, buddy, you didn't get a warning. One of Rome's more violent emperors, Domitian, he was a die-hard fan when it came to the Colosseum and its games. So much so that one guy in the crowd heckled a gladiator one day, and the emperor had him pulled from the audience and then thrown into the center of the arena. And also, no, he did not leave that arena that day. Hey Maximus, smile! Me? Number 3. Crappy jobs. The groom of the stool was perhaps one of the worst jobs to have in the Middle Ages. But It's one of the most important. The groom of the king's close stool was a position created during King Henry VIII's reign. Their job was to wipe the king's behind. Yeah, and if that doesn't sound horrible enough, this poor lad would also have to carry around the king's stool with him on his back, like a backpack, like he's going to school, with a big backpack full of poop. He would also have to monitor the king's meal times, and they would also plan their day around when they thought the king was going to experience a bowel movement. They were just gonna have to wait around until it happens. If I were the king, I would be so anxious if a little dude just started hanging out near me. He's like, hey boss, you feeling all right? You good? A little full? A lot of bread you ate there, eh? Why don't you take a 5? Trust me. Trust me. This job was an honor to have. Sons of noblemen were awarded this role. You would get pretty close to the king, I mean, obviously, but as time went on, these grooms o' stools became secretaries to the king, eventually getting a higher pay and benefits. Number 2, Vatican's secret archives. The archives are 53 miles long. There's around 35,000 volumes of catalog in them, and the Vatican's secret archives are honestly no joke. They're very real, but in order to see them for yourself, it's gonna take some time. Those indexes are not public, hence why I included it in this top secret video. You're welcome. Only scholars can access them after they're 75 years old. Their official purpose is to house official paperwork, and of course, it's a treasure trove of anything and everything related to the Pope. It's also full of ancient documents, because I mean, where else do you safely store a letter from Mary Queen of Scots, for example? Yeah, Mary Queen of Scots was killed after serving roughly 20 years in custody, but eventually she was sentenced to death for conspiring to kill Queen Elizabeth I. Before she met her fate, however, she wrote a letter to Pope Sixtus V, literally begging for her life. But evidently, the Pope did not intervene, and on February 8th, 1587, Mary Queen of Scots was executed. You know, letters like that. For example, I've played too much Assassin's Creed, I think, in my life. Vatican letters? I'm on my way, Ezio. Let's do this. Number 1, the less armor, the better. It's 70 AD, it's ancient Roman times, you're walking into the Colosseum, you're feeling hyped, right? You're eyeing down that 8'6" monster in front of you, his name's Gore or something terrifying. If you had to battle these guys, you would want a weapon of some sorts. A Nerf bat, give me, like I don't care, literally anything. Weapons in the Colosseum were a necessity, but did you know some gladiators would use nets to fight? Nets, like they're catching butterflies. This class was referred to as the Retiari. Their combat style was built around the ways of fishermen, hence the nets. Yeah, Popeye versus Maximus. Place your bets, guys. Who's gonna get it? Popeye would for sure f him up. More often than not, these gladiators would use nets and a trident. How cool is that? They would take their time too. They also wouldn't wear any armor. They try and keep it light and be fast. They would take their time avoiding these mighty swings from these colossal warriors and then eventually, tire them out. And then when the time was just right, they would toss a net over them and then proceed to poke them as hard and as fast as they could. They would poke the out of them. It helps to be quick, but if you've seen Game of Thrones, you know spears don't always work.